Well, did you always know you wanted to be a chiropractor, or was there kind of like a key point in your life where you were like, this is it for me, or you see the way? You know what I mean?
When I saw Dr. Bonnie, it was very sports chiropractic. Like
I can
it doesn't.
imagine. I can only imagine. I wish I could experience. I wish you could move here to Bonners Ferry
I
and bring them all with you. Hey, everybody, welcome back, practitioners, to the Thriving Holistic Practitioner podcast. I'm so excited to have you here with us today. We have another great guest. I'm so grateful for so many amazing guests. Today, joining us is Dr. Tiff, who is from North Dakota, and she is a holistic chiropractor. And today, we're going to talk about how she has been able to build a practice that allows her to see her patients weekly and be able to scale. Ooh, I love it. So let's dive in. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, absolutely. Of course. So, how did you get into holistic chiropractic work to begin with?
Well, chiropractic is a pretty strong continuum of as every degree is, I suppose. You can kind of you get to decide how you want to practice once you're in it. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to do it that way. I am going to I observed like 50 offices in school. I knew exactly what I wanted to do and how I wanted to do it. I visualized me being the person to do it. And so um I think a lot of my school, like I didn't always go to class. um and so I think a lot of my school, I had both kids, both babies in chiropractic school. So I had a very different outlook. I really wanted to make all of my time efficient when I wasn't home. And so I didn't always go to class, but I did go I did go and observe many offices. And so I really got to see this is how I want to do it. This is how I want to make people feel. And so when I got out of practice, I knew. I knew that I needed to work the most on myself, on, being the best chiropractor that I could. But in every doctorate or practitioner, the the most important thing is that you understand yourself so that you can understand people, and you know how to build rapport, and you know how to build connection, and you know how to build trust, and you know how to build safety. When that happens, it's a totally different ballgame, because what we all know is that that isn't how normal is. So
Hmm.
we get to offer something very different to people. We get to offer our heart. We get to see them way beyond maybe their physical symptom, and start to show them a path of hope that could actually be there forever. So then it's logical from a recommendation standpoint. It's it's logical that you can grow and you can scale. It's logical to see people weekly. Um, that seems very simple when you truly know them and you tell the truth about what is recommended.
Yeah. Well, did you always know you wanted to be a chiropractor, or was there kind of like a key point in your life where you were like, this, this is it for me, or you see the way? You know what I mean? Kind of, or did
Mhm.
you just always know that was something you wanted to do?
I I saw a chiropractor first when I was in eighth grade for basketball, and I played high school and college basketball. And so when I saw Dr. Bonnie, it was very sports chiropractic like. And so it was my junior year in high school. I had a conversation with her, and I'm like, what should I do that I can work with kids, have the freedom? I mean, put me in a 9 to 5 job and Tiff is going to drown. So I knew things that I couldn't do. um, and she's like, be a chiropractor. I'm like, oh, so actually, initially I wanted to be a psychologist because I love the mind. I love mindset. And no wonder I've went down this path, right? Because I do a lot of that work with patients. I do a lot of that work with clients in my mentorship business too. Um, but I didn't want to do anything with pharmaceuticals. I didn't want to be associated with them. I didn't want to have a white coat on. And so that's when I realized, like, ooh, I want to do something that people's bodies can truly heal, from what I can facilitate, but not only what I can facilitate, but what they can help themselves with.
That's neat. That's cool. I also went to chiropractors like from a young age. It never did dawn on me to become one. I think that's so cool that you asked your chiropractor what you could do when you grow up. Like, what an interesting turn of events. I wouldn't have thought of asking my chiropractor that question. That's
But
so
see,
neat, though.
even though she was a pain sports chiropractor, like she was also a very important person in my life. So I had that foundation built. That was how I wanted to do it. I remember how many, gosh, she came to so many of my sports games and went to so many
Oh,
of those sports games. And that's what I've always done. Like I really feel like our patients are I said it like year two. I remember year two, and my husband is like, Tiff, you're off your rocker. But I said, these patients are my family. My practice is my family, in addition to our family. Now obviously he gets it because I've been doing this for 18 and a half years, but that is a very unconventional way to practice. And in my opinion, that is the only way. Is how do you treat them like your family, and how do they treat you like their family? Oh my God, the amount of miracles that can happen in that environment um is is what we wouldn't even expect.
I can
It doesn't
imagine. I can only imagine. I wish I could experience. I wish you could move here to Bonners Ferry
I
and bring them all with you.
Hey, I think it's one of the most common requests I get actually is, can you just can you just bring you and everyone to where I live now?
Yes.
Because when you find your people and when you find your team, you don't want to move. You don't want to leave.
Yeah. Well, and let's talk about that for a minute. What were some key things you think you did that have created this family feeling? Like, was there a certain approach? Was it a methodology? Was it, I don't know, giving them gifts when they come? Like, I mean, there's so many different things we can do to make people feel welcome. Like, what were some things you did, especially maybe in the beginning to,
Yeah.
because you had a vision for it,
Yeah.
maybe you didn't quite have all the hows figured out yet, but you knew what your end result was. Like, how did that kind of go to be or come to pass?
So I always thought about, when I walk into this door, what do I want to feel? And so I think um smells, I see colors. I always wanted it to feel like home, like they were in my living room. And so to me, it mattered. A lot of people would say, I mean, I think of back in the day, my dad would be like, why are you spending so much money on the feeling of the office? Because it matters. Everything mattered to me. The paperwork mattered to me. The handwriting mattered to me. The pens mattered to me. If somebody would say like, hey, I think it would be really fun to work here. Do you need anyone to just answer your phones? I'm like, yeah, that's not how TIFF works. Before you will answer a phone, you need to practice your scripts. You need to practice them in front of yourself and other people. And then people need to test by calling. I mean, like, that's how meticulous I was with my standards of, this is what healing touch chiropractic stands for. This is like, then that's the floor, right? Like that's it. If you go below the floor, then you do not work here anymore. And that's how I ran it. And it was I mean, back in the day, that was a shocker to the average person, right? The average person's
That's
like, well,
fantastic. Yeah.
why
They would
is
be
that?
wowed.
Yes. And that's what I still require. And um so first there's always a like, my visit one is a certain way, they get adjusted, and my visit two is always results. I go over what visit one was like, and we talk through what's going on, and I decode because I'm spiritual also. And so like, hey, where is life for you? Are you happy where you're at? I mean, those are all the things that matter to me. um I'm writing a book right now, and one of the pieces to it is, we as providers do not see the soul of people. We just see the physical frame. So wrong. It's so wrong. That is not even, I mean, it's not the majority of anything, actually. So try to understand them. Try to ask them about their life. Ask them about what's holding them back. Asking them what they really want to do in this lifetime, to me, is just what should always happen. And so if they choose to go down that roadmap with us, they always get a new patient gift, which is like a custom mug in a hot chocolate packet, or a tea packet, whatever. They get chocolates for their birthday. I mean, we have stuff all the time. We have coffee and tea and apple ciders and um, every time, that's what I think about, is what would make me feel loved here. What would make me pay, like to walk into the same office the same way every single day, month, year. Gross. Like, no, we need to change things up. When it's spring, we need to change things up, and we need to find ways to make their day, because, like, honestly, a lot of people's days aren't made ever. There's not a lot of joy. There's not a lot of things that are really great. So, hey, what if we can be the one greatest thing in their day? That's how I created it. And that's how I trained my team. And I was a hard
Wow.
ass. Like, I was a hard ass. Well, I
I'm
still am.
glad you were though. No, I think this is really cool. What I really admire about what you did was that you set a standard that so many times, and I see this in business, not just practitionership, it's all business a lot of times. The standard is set by the norm. And you knew that it wasn't about, oh, I'm going to buck the system because I want to have an innovative position, or I want to be, I want to grab more market share. It wasn't like that. You were coming from this heart-centered place. It's like, I want to change people's lives. My mission is to go deep. Like this actually aligns with my personal mission, is to make a
Mm.
difference deeply, not necessarily wide, like reaching a lot of people, but it's kind of like, I'm good with reaching enough people, but I really want to reach them on a deep level. I want to change their life from the inside. And I just think that is so cool. I also really appreciate how, even though you really never had any formal, like, say, business training, or you didn't have a corporate job because you kind of got into this through high school, you recognize the importance of every little piece of that in that
Mm.
experience. And then you set that bar. And that reminds me of a training I used to do, because my background is in automotive. And we've gone to a car dealership and you have a normal experience. They may answer the phone, they may not. They make you sound like a burden on their day when you're, service, this is Lindsay, versus, hey, thanks for choosing. Like, just having a joyful way of answering the phone. It's like these little things can make a night and day difference in a situation like a car dealership that isn't that fun for people. Same thing,
Yes.
like, not saying a chiropractor isn't fun, but if they're in pain or they're like having discomfort, it's not fun,
Oh.
So
And
having something that just like lightens the mood, that is so
so,
awesome.
well, in recognizing, like, they're coming in, number one, because they've been to a chiropractor before, and it was either a great experience, like, oh my gosh, like, I grew up seeing a chiropractor, I can't wait, or more than likely it hasn't been a good experience. And so not only are we, when we're working with humans, we're working in a lot of different pieces of this, because they're not sure they should be there. I mean, three people could refer them there, and if they had a poor experience, that's how strong that bad experience pulls at them. And so whatever you can do to disrupt normal is gets them to see that there could even be another way. And I think, like, even beyond chiropractic, like, how we treat you is how I also suggest you can treat other people.
Hmm.
How it smells in here, how it feels in here, how happy people are to see you, how many freaking hugs you get from all of us. We're all barefoot. Like, I've disrupted normal in just about every way. I'm like, screw it. This is what I am, and this is what I stand for, and this is how I want them to feel. So whatever way I need to match their energy, to know that they know that I see them, that's where trust is built. It isn't about me.
Yes.
It is only about them. And I need to be strong enough in my confidence and my courage and my conviction and my communication and my, like, embodiment of who I am and what I will deliver to them, but then they get to feel that and know that this is different. And that's like when it's just like deciding standards for your life. It's no different. But where we get stuck is we get stuck in chasing the mighty dollar. We get stuck in chasing the biggest social media influence. I mean, all this bullshit that ego takes away from us leading from our heart. And, truly, then once you build a practice big enough, it works like a machine, because this is what Healing Touch stands for. That's what I will always say. Like, if my team asks me questions, I'm like, well, I mean, this is maybe what you would do, but what do you think Healing Touch says it should do? Like, that's a different perspective, because no, we don't have this umbrella of a business with 3 different doctors doing whatever they want. That isn't what we stand for. What we stand for is this is how we deliver. Now, how Dr. A, B, and C does it is very different. How staff A, B, C, D does it is very different, but we fall under a standard that will inevitably make their day, whether or not they get out of pain that day or not.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Did your practice grow quickly because of this model in the beginning,
Grew,
like word of mouth?
yeah, I would say, well, it grew extremely fast. I was seeing 100 people a week in a month. So
I thought so.
I,
I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense.
right. But like, I really, what I thought was a detriment in the beginning, because I had a strong standard and a strong system that, like, hey, if you don't fit into the system, you don't really get to come whenever you want. Honestly, I have a very strong communication. Like, no, those aren't the people that should be here. There's plenty of other awesome chiropractors that just want to just do 2 times a year, right? Like, let them. I'm not your girl, because like I'm not your girl. And so when we once thought what was a shortcoming, like, oh, you do it this way and you do it this way, like, I'm not going to do that. I'm not. And now is absolutely what everybody wants. What I know to be true and what people tell me is patients want a roadmap. They want a plan. They want to know what isn't right, what's wrong. I don't necessarily position it in what's wrong, but they want to know what's going on in their body and what to do. So it's clear, and them and us are in a partnership. And I will always say, if you're not 100, I'm out. I can't have you just showing up to the table and expecting our magic fingers to do the work, because that's actually not even true. Your body is doing it. So the only way where this is going to work is a partnership, and that's 100. And
That is
that's
so
the
cool.
way we do it.
So when you grew quicker than you might have expected, did that pose any new challenges for your business? Like, did it force you to hire people, or did you feel like did you ever at any point feel like, okay, the wheels are falling off the apple cart a little bit. What am I going to do to straighten this out? Like, what was that journey like?
I didn't really. I did grow quite incrementally. Now there was, there's always sloughing off. And I remember probably 3 times in the 18 years that it's like, ooh, okay, this is like a cleansing of sort. And it was usually when I was going through a big transformation myself. What I needed to manage was my ego. And I spent a lot of time thinking I was pretty awesome. And so, because truly people struggle in business. People don't do it like this in business. And I did it very different. And it was very successful. And what I needed to mind the most was me thinking like I was awesome. And not in the, like, I knew I was awesome, not in the very strong, confident, grounded, but like, yeah, I'm awesomer than you. And so in, true honesty, that was my holdup. It was me thinking I could do anything. And that is true. And there's always this little so did I have growing pains? I hired a lot of wrong people. I delegated in a way that was out of ego for a long time. I'm too important for this job, kind of like that kind of thing. And that was all just an evolution. I always will say, like, it is the more responsibility you have, the harder this is.
Mm-hmm.
The harder, most people don't believe that because they think when you make more money, it's easier, or when you help more people, it's easier. It's not.
Mm-hmm.
Decisions are a lot harder because there's a lot more on the line. There's a lot more people that love you. There's a lot more people that trust you. There's a lot more people that you can disappoint. One of the quotes, I don't even know who this person was, but said the um, qualitative, quantitative approach to know that you've done a hell of a job in leadership is how many people you've disappointed. I'm like, mm-hmm. So
Interesting.
we can want all of it, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
we can want the money and the cash and all the things, but when it's time to then grow again, when it's time to take another risk, can we? Because it's harder to do that when there is more on the line. And so that's actually what I ran into a lot more is the responsibility to carry something forward that I said I will. And how do I trust my people more? How do I train my people better? How do I make this work with other doctors so the standard is always met? And I'm not just like, okay, now I got my team and now, hey, I'm out. Good luck.
Mm-hmm.
That isn't what I stand for. And that isn't what I would ever want for anyone.
And I think like anybody listening to this, like if, sorry, one second. She was very loud. I think that if people can go into this with a um, humility about them to where they can set that standard, but then I would also say checking in, like what, okay, so for example, with coaching, like coaching, you mentioned you do some coaching. I've
Mhm.
dealt a lot with coaching programs where I've been a client. I'm paying for this. I was just telling a friend of mine, I'm like, I always seem to feel lost. It was like if I didn't show up, nobody noticed or nobody cared.
Oh, that's
You know what
terrible.
I mean? Yeah.
Yeah.
And I have yet to see or be in a program where it's like, hey, we noticed you signed up. Yes, we have this available, but we haven't seen you. Is everything okay? How are you going? Like when I'm launching my program, this what you're saying, I'm listening to, I'm like internalizing what you're saying because I'm like, these are all things that are true for me. And I'm still figuring out the hows am I going to deliver. There is a sense of fear because it's like I know the standard of what I want to deliver, but I also get nervous like if I set that standard so high, is there going to come a time where I can't keep it up because I have too many people? You know what I mean? So I'm
Yep.
really curious to hear because that's important to me. I want people to feel like it might be a group or community program, but I want them to feel like it's one-on-one, like they are not forgotten, that they are touched. I'm reaching out to them if I haven't heard. I don't want to forget anybody. Like I want them all to know that they are seen and heard and that their business matters to me, right? So
Mm.
I'm like thinking through logistically, like how can I ensure that on a scale? Like let's say I have 100 people in the program, like that's a massive scale. So I'm curious, how did you do that? How did you ensure that people were seen and heard? Like what happens if somebody doesn't book with you for a couple of weeks? Would you
Mm.
notice? Does your like how do you have that set up?
Yeah, I do notice that stuff. I notice it like to go back into your like that first question of, how do you treat everyone the same, whether there's 10 or 100 people? Like, let's just call it that, right? Because I do think, yeah, some of us we create programs that intimacy and safety is where it's at. That's all of my programs, all of them. With that said, it's their responsibility to show up. And so I care less, honestly. Um, you can't make people show up.
Yeah.
And the more you coddle them to make sure everything's okay, the more they expect that you're responsible for them showing up. And
Mm,
so I'm a pretty hard ass with them
mhm,
too. Like, hey, this is what we committed to. What's happening? What's off base? What's going on in life that you haven't been here? Now we have systems, right? Well, like we have front desk systems, but I'd say this even in mentorship, is letting go of My responsibility for them is the difference between me believing that they are a genius and they can find their way on their own and be assertive to, I mean, if they're in your program of 100 people, they said they're going to show up. So like show up or don't, but don't bitch about not having the results then, because I know who's here. And I will put my effort into the people that show up and that are all in versus the ones that are afraid to be seen. So
Yeah.
not a very popular opinion, honestly. But when you see scale, I see scale and large amounts of people. I am not going to spend my time and energy on the people that don't want to be there. I always notice it. And I'll always, if my team hasn't handled it, like, hey, where's Jane been? What's going on with Jane? I used to text more back in the day, you know, just checking in with people. I don't anymore. And I really do believe it's not because I'm too busy. It's because I see people in their power very differently. Like this is on you, and we will have a conversation, but I'm going to make sure you're okay. I can't make you respond, even though you just like cried in front of me and said, this is what you want, and this is where you want to go. You have the power to show up, and I don't. And so the people that are part of my practice, that are part of my programs, they show up because like,
Interesting. I love that.
yeah, I don't hold hands. I don't think they learn anything. I don't think anybody learns anything by people holding their hand. I believe you learn by like, hey, this is an uncomfortable group for me to be in. And I'm going to speak that I'm uncomfortable, but I'm going to speak that I'm uncomfortable in a way that other people can help support me through this, whatever that is, whatever that comes from. If it's conditioning, if it's an insecurity, if it's some people call it that trauma, you know, whatever it is, like you're responsible for yourself.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I mean, that's true. That is true. I think I might be putting a little bit more emphasis on it for the perspective of like, I do, and this, I mean, I'm glad we're having this this talk, and like I'm being vulnerable about it because I'm sure other people feel this way too. Like, there's this feeling of we want so much. It's like at some point we almost want more for others than they want for themselves. And so it's
mhm,
like balancing that between like, this is what's available to you. Are you taking it or are you not taking it? And I do think having some checks and balances of just reaching out, because I do think in some, maybe not in a chiropractor setting, because that's just like show up every week and you're going to have your
right.
session. But when there's homework and there's certain things, like
Mhm.
people can get stuck and they can get like, you know, on little things that are really easy that if I reached out, they could get help. But I agree that after a certain point, if they haven't responded or they haven't reached out to ask the question, then well, they made
Mhm.
their decision.
Mhm.
Thank you so much. So yeah, I
Yeah, and I
100%.
think like
That's smart.
I do think that even in programs though, I mean I've ran a bunch of programs that I do not reach out for people if they don't show up. And if I feel like they're stuck, like they're responsible to show up and say they're stuck. Now
Yeah,
that's leaders leading leaders in a very different way of like, hey, I expect that this is what you do when you like this is the forecasting part. When you get stuck, this is what you do. And if you don't reach out, I cannot help. Like nobody can help. That would be like you're in a marriage and you're absolutely miserable and you don't say anything until you want to file for a divorce. Well, what are we doing? You need
right.
you need to be honest. You need to be honest with yourself and with me, but that is personal responsibility, that is personal power, that is um seeing the strength of the person in front of you. And it doesn't matter what role we're in, it whether we're a coach or a mentor, we're running programs, or we're a doctor, practitioner, provider. If you don't see the power in people and you think you're the savior, you're effed. It's not fair for them. So that
Powerful. That's powerful.
mhm,
Yeah, so
they're
true.
way
It really
stronger than
is.
we think they are.
Yeah. Well, and I think that the stemming from that is this belief that, we worry about what other people think of us. And so that is giving our power away to them, which it's just the whole thing is jacked up right in that whole thing. So
And
that's
that's
true.
with
It's
like
very good.
if you look at what evolution is and what growth is, we're always being challenged with that at the next level. Like
Mhm.
we're always being challenged by that. And the more we externalize and allow the externalization to become our normal, so AKA they don't like us, I'm going to dim down my light. That's BS, man. Like God gave us a calling and it's our responsibility to lead it. Done.
Yeah. Yeah. So how did you do that? How did you start to grow? Like you said you scaled more sustainably. Like you said, it kind of like worked itself out. But you clearly have a way. I mean, you've established your processes and your procedures, and so that the vibe is the same for everybody, that feeling. How have you figured out when is it time to hire or how to hire or like what was that whole journey like? Because it just started with you, right? Did it just start with you or did you have a team from the beginning?
I hired before I opened, actually. I definitely did a
Okay.
different job most.
Yeah.
I
Well, that makes sense in some cases, but that's why I wasn't sure.
yeah, I've really never been a when I have enough money and when there's enough people, I'm going to hire. I mean, much to my detriment, truly, because there's been a lot of hires that didn't need to happen in the way they needed to happen, because everything was too complex with the people there. I am a very intuitive human, and when I felt like things were not expanding at the level or ability that we could, that's when I hired every time. This last hire
Ooh,
from a
I want to
doctor.
dig in on that more.
Okay, go for
That's
it.
so opposite of what most people think. Like, tell me more about that.
Yeah. Okay. So of course there's X's and O's. Um, I mean, it needs to make sense from there needs to be roles for people. But when we start going through the stage of the rocket ship and we're gonna like blow the top off, it it for the majority of the time, we are working on getting rid of 80% of our tasks, right? So if me and my genius is like, this is what I need to do in order to do this, I need to get rid of a whole lot of other things. And so when it was time for that, then it was either time to reallocate everyone's roles or you hire. And that's how I've done it everywhere. And so that happens from the top down, not the bottom up. The top down, the top of the leader has her two or three things that she's doing 80% of the time. And that's it. They're not doing all the other things. So like in my life right now, my team handles 99% of everything. I show up, I adjust new patients, results, appointments. I have final say in certain things, but I've trained all these things on this is how this looks now. And I always did from the beginning. I'm like, this is your responsibility. You decide this. You decide this. You decide this. You decide this. So when it was time for like the next slough off of the 80% and there was nobody for it to go to, or the next people below me, my two like key leadership people, if they're full and there's nobody below them, well then it's time to hire. I always
Gotcha.
think of the bottleneck. Where's the bottleneck and where's the well, I say the power of one, but it can be the opposite. If only one person can do a job, then that is really scary.
Yes, yes.
So,
Especially in a situation like that, you definitely need
yep,
to have cross training going on.
yep. And
Yeah.
if I'm the bottleneck, then we need to really work even harder on what are all the things that I'm doing to run a business and to manage a business and who can actually do that. And then you find the next bottleneck and the next bottleneck, and then that's when I hire. That's how I've done it forever. I really go against what most people say.
Mm. Well, and I don't even think there's like a written rule about it. And that's one of the reasons I asked, because I think it's one of those things that people, when we get into business, we do the best we can with what we know and what's in
Yes.
front of us, right? And so it's a scary feeling to say, I'm going to potentially overextend myself to hire help when I can't see visually the return on that within an X amount of time frame. So that's where people will push and push their limits to
Yeah.
the max. And what ends up happening is you're compromising patient care, you're compromising your own mental health, you're compromising the health of your employees. Like it's just a ball that snowballs. So it's
Yeah.
smart because I'm sure that like if you think about from an energetic perspective, like when the energy is moving, then you're keeping that flow, you're keeping it open for new potential business. But when the energy is stagnant, I think subconsciously we kind of hold back and we're like, okay, I'm at max capacity. I can't, I'm not ready to hire, but I can't take on more work. Well, even though
Mhm.
that might be a silent thought, it's not silent. It's still affecting things in your business. So I think the
100%.
fact that you're doing that is really cool because that instantly changes that. And I'm sure every single time you saw a shift in your clientele, like it was
Yes.
followed by a boom, so to speak.
And there were times that it's been interesting now that with additional chiropractors, like I've never really been able to market because I was always close to capacity when it was just me. And so that's why I started my mentorship business because I knew that in order to expand to Chiro, I needed the right chiropractor. Like that's a lot harder than the right team member. And so it was like, that's what I've been dabbling with the last 5 years of like that right one. Yep. I hired and that wasn't the right one. And I hired and yeah, that wasn't the right one either. And you go through that until you have that. And so I have been, in those phases of like when my kids were in 2 or 3 sports every, like all year, every season. I knew I didn't have the ability to grow. I had the ability to take care of who I needed to take care of, but the top couldn't come off, right? So
Mhm.
I never had the logical part of seeing the return though, ever. Like I have made big business decisions on soul and heart. And yes, my mind is always like, does this make any sense? But a lot of times it was a no. This actually, if I were to do the numbers with my husband or my dad, they'd be like, Tiff, you are off your rocker. I'm like, yeah, but this is right. And this is what we're doing. And that's how I've done it. And I think the ebbs and the flows and there's a time and a season for it to be stagnant.
Mhm.
There's a time and a season for it just to be able to go and you just need to show up. And then that next level of like, okay, I feel like I'm suffocating and they're suffocating. Now I do need to take a leap. And what does that look like? So
Yes. Yeah, I hear you. That's really interesting. Have you ever considered like pulling chiropractors out of school and like bringing them up within? Because you have such a different model. Like you could kind of mold them in a way, like an internship or something.
I know. Um, yeah, that's an intriguing perspective. I have been thinking about this more so when they get out, but um, every school is kind of has their own philosophy and their own I don't know if influencers would be the right word. And so gosh, it was probably like 13 years ago. I was kind of in the I don't know, with groups and coaching groups in the Chiral world. And I'm like, I don't really like any of this. So I actually kind of have just pulled out a little bit or a lot of it.
Mhm.
And I'm just starting to not plug back in for me, but plug back in for people. Um, as I know that this philosophy or this perspective or this mindset or this way of leading is um, very beneficial for people. I do believe that that is what they want.
Well, I think there's luckily, and I'm sure different from when you started, there's a shift in your client patient humanity's perspective. Like more people are
Yeah.
seeking an alternative, more people are seeking like a more holistic approach to their own health, and they're taking more accountability for their own health than they were probably 15 years ago.
Yeah.
So that's really cool. I mean, almost in a way, you could kind of create like, because you have such a unique approach, it's almost like you could franchise isn't the right word, but like expand locations, but just based on your model, right? Like it would be really effective to do that. And I'll venture to say there's probably chiropractors in different parts of the country who would totally embrace that. They just hadn't thought of it themselves. You know what I mean? And you've
Yes.
got all the systems in place. Like it would just be really easy to like box it into an SOP and like almost expand your model. It'd be pretty slick to
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah, I'm writing a book right now, and that's what I'm noticing is running synonymously of writing this book and providing these probably self-study courses.
Hmm.
Because I've always seen this, I've truly always ran like a franchise. And that's how I've thought about it. 5 years in, I actually met with franchise attorneys and a
Hmm.
mentor. Like, what would it take for this to be reproduced? Not sure I'd want to deal with the staffing. Honestly, that would be the biggest thing, and the staffing and the training and the reproducing of all the things. But like the systems and the processes and the embodiment, I do a lot with human design. Like I've always been a personality test junkie. I mean, since being a little girl, I'm like, these are the coolest things ever. I love the horoscopes. I mean, I love friggin' everything. And so like bringing that also into my world, I do that in my hiring process. I do that in my team training process. I do that all in my mentorship process. That um, it isn't about putting people in a box, but it's understanding what their natural design is. Like, where should
Oh
we
yeah.
be? How do we do this? And so that's the X factor that you can bring in. But you're right. I mean, like that's what I've told my right hand from a SOP standpoint. I'm like, hey, there's a million that we could create, and maybe not even a full package of them, but templates, because I do believe people don't, especially if they're existing, if they're new, that I mean, whatever, you're starting at ground zero, you get to do whatever you want. But if you're existing and you're shifting an existing practice, that's hard. that's that's more difficult, because it does start at, I mean, yes, the power is because you have the people, but likely your patients are going to change because you're going to change. And, how do you start to come in? Like, to me, blank slate, clean canvas is the easiest. The
Yeah.
new doc, the new doc is typically broke though. So, you know, fair enough. I mean, I invested even when I was broke, but it takes so much research on that back end of a student, and so many students aren't interested in research to build their own.
Well,
So
I have
these
a
are all the
solution
things.
for you, something to think about. If you were to package it up as a, let's say a business model, you could even consider it like a consulting course for new chiropractors. Like you could, however you word it. Like
Mhm.
there's a company called FlexBuy. I'm happy to send you the information if you want.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
like they offer financing on coaching packages. And it's
Mhm.
nice because they're the bank. You don't have to deal with taking payments and managing all that. It's like you get paid and they deal with the rest. And if the people default, they deal with it. You're still going to deliver, like it takes away that pressure of having to micromanage the financial piece of it. But it also gives those new practitioners, and after you did a couple, you might find that like, yeah, so it's a $30,000 commitment,
Mhm.
but um, you'll make that back within 6 months or whatever, because you'll have done enough of them that you'll have some data to back it up.
Totally.
So, I mean, that is an option, something along those lines. Like you could just sell it as a business consulting package and you onboard them, you teach them your philosophy. Maybe you send a team out. Have you ever heard of Alex Hermosi?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm like, believe it or not, I still meet a lot of people who've never heard of him. I'm like, how do you not know? But okay. Well, you know how he started with his gym model? It's kind of the
Yeah.
same thing. Like he would fly out and help them get their gym going. I mean, like it's
Mhm.
almost the same kind of concept. Of course, you'd have to think how you would manage. You don't want to leave your patients. They're part of your
Yeah.
family. So
Yeah.
it's a logistics thing, but still, that'd be so cool.
Well, and it's my rightest hand, Lindy. She's been with me for 17 years. So
Wow.
she's the left brain. She's the system. She's the tracking. She's the all that stuff.
Yeah.
And we've talked many times of like, this just needs to be wrapped up into something of how this could be reproduced. Even just how to use apps, how to use the project management apps, and how to manage people to the outcome instead of people to their task. See the difference? Like if you manage
Mhm.
people to the outcome, there's an impossible goal, and we are bringing people to that versus people to their task is just 1 equals 8.
Right, right.
That isn't going to get you anywhere. And so, like really working with Lindy and Cal in leadership also, like they're the ones that are leading the majority of the doctors right now. I'm mentoring in the doctor world. They are mentoring in this is what Healing Touch stands for. This is how we do this. This is why we do this. So when things aren't upheld, right? Communication standards aren't, follow through isn't. It's my team, Cal and Lindy, mentoring the doctors. That's freaking brilliant, in my opinion. I'm like, if every doctor was okay with the staff running the show, this would be a lot different. Then
It's
we get
true.
to work on in our genius. Like we get to work in what we're supposed to work with. That's what the patients want us to work on.
Right. Yeah, definitely. Well,
Yeah,
and your brain space is more devoted in that moment to your patients versus, the thousands of things you have to do when the patients are gone. It's so much easier to just present and deliver that quality experience. It's so
exactly.
fantastic. Yeah. That's
Mm.
wonderful. What lots of good wisdom you definitely have. Like, a lot of innate wisdom that I think it's really cool how it's actually something I've started to notice after interviewing a lot of practitioners, how many are driven by their own um, instincts and how right on it is. Like if I could sum that up as one thing for people, it would just be to listen to your inner voice and to trust it and to move forward because it's working for so many people. It's so cool.
And that does it takes falling on your face, and it takes being really uncomfortable and saying yes to the things that you're not really sure you know how to do, and saying no to most everything else. Warren Buffett said the difference between successful people and non-successful people is that successful people say no to just about everything. And so you can't, as the owner or the doctor or the whatever, you can't carry so much. Like you gotta be doing what's in your genius. And then you allow everyone else on your team to also do the same. And you hire for beyond the genius, right? Like you find the next person to be able to do the next step. And like this all starts to shift and change.
Mhm.
That's what I believe our role as a leader is. And a true leader, the one who disappoints a whole lot of people by by going bigger and going bolder and going braver, because a lot of people don't understand what we're doing in that place.
Yeah, it's true. So true. And that is something like I think that you had going for you is that vision. And then you mentioned early on that you said, did you say that there was a part where you were feeling like you were very controlling of that expectation and that outcome? Did that mean that you found yourself getting wrapped up in those little tasks to make sure they were getting done right? Or did you always seem to have no problem outsourcing or offloading them, but you would just micromanage? Like, what was that like for you in the beginning
I
mentally?
offloaded, and then if it didn't work, I blamed them because I didn't.
Okay.
So I
Yeah.
think the thing missing was personal responsibility of, oh, Tiff, come on. And Lindy, I mean, if she were to be on here with me, I mean, she would say, oh, 100%. She'd give it all to me, and I'd ask some questions, and she'd say, go figure it out. And then when I wouldn't do it right, she'd be mad at me.
That's
So
hilarious.
I mean, she even would say, my gosh, I remember the first few weeks that she started. She was a patient actually. So I knew her before. She had amazing experiences, with me being her chiropractor. And I had ways I wanted the toilet paper roll to be. I had ways I wanted the garbage bag to like not have the knot on the front. Come on. Like, I mean, all of these crazy over the top things mattered. And, when someone just starts like the first 3 months, you probably think that person's crazy because you're like, nope, the toilet paper roll is wrong. The blah, 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 blah. But after that, and after trust is developed, I mean, I've given her the power to make just about every business decision. I mean, there aren't many that she doesn't make, and now there aren't many that either of them make, So for the greater good of Healing Touch, the greater good of the patients, and the greater good of us, what's the best decision? You guys get to do that now. And so that's not how it was in the beginning, though. I definitely had a tendency of blaming over delegating and then blaming. So
Yeah. Yeah. That's cool. Well, you're a very wise woman. I appreciate you sharing your experiences here so candidly. It's such a blessing and a gift for people to hear. And I really hope that more people are inspired to reach higher for that experience that they kind of maybe desired to do. Because I bet that's something I used to run across in the car dealership. I worked at like Toyota dealership or Chrysler or Ford. So I never really worked at a Highline store, but I always
okay.
wanted to deliver that Highline experience. And I'm like, so what if they drive a Chrysler Sebring? Like they chose to bring to the dealership. Like they could have gone to Joe's Auto, like what? So why not deliver them an experience that makes them feel better? And then the answer was always, we just have too many and there's too much money. That's too much money to make them all feel that way. And it was like, rather than asking the question of like, how could I create that experience and make something affordable or scalable? Or, like instead of having even an open mind and pursuing that idea because it was meaningful, so I hope more people are inspired to think about that a little bit more abstractly.
Mm-hmm. And I also think you can have both of it. Like you can have it's always an and if you want it to be, like
Mhm.
you can take care of people at a very high level and it can be affordable and it doesn't need to break the bank and it isn't like unnecessary. I do like immersions and I do 1 day retreats and I am the same way there. I'm like, this is how I want the food to be. This is how I want the experience to be. This is the surprise and delight aspect of this. And I mean, you run them and you run them and you run them and you understand like, oh, okay, so now we have it automated. Once again, I could have a SOP if you wanted to do X, Y, and Z.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
Because
it's so true.
how I've ran everything is let's
Yeah.
play the experience for a while until like, ooh, this is the sweet spot. And then we reproduce it. And then this is just how we do it. Then I don't need to be part of it anymore. I'm part of
Yes.
the like creation of the foundations of how I want to actually make people feel and the results I want to get.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. Wow. This has been amazing, Tiff. Thank you so much.
It
Like,
has been
um,
amazing.
it's cool. I'm really grateful because I prior to starting this podcast, I had another podcast. It was called The Freedom Entrepreneur. And I just got so burnt out because people want to be on my podcast because they have an agenda. Like they're selling something.
Oh,
And I pivoted my business to focus on practitioners, and that's great. And then that's kind of what led me to this podcast. But what I love the most is how genuine people are. They're coming onto this podcast, they're sharing their heart, they're sharing their soul, and there's no hidden agenda. It's not like I've
mm,
got something to sell. You're a local chiropractor. Like people in Idaho can't come see you, unfortunately, unless they flew out there every week. And
which
so
they
thank you.
could, but
I know, right? One day when I'm making millions, I can. But for now, but still, like the fact that you are willing to come on here and share, and I really mean it. I'm so grateful for your time. Thank you so much.
thank you. This was a very easy, delightful conversation. Because really, I do think at the core of all of our hearts, we just want to help more people. And so
Yeah.
finding our way to do that, finding the people that have created a platform to do that, inviting us in, that's the key. That's how collaborations work, man.
It's true. It is true. Well, still, for those of us that do want to fly to see you, what's the best place they can connect with you online?
I'm on Instagram, Dr. Tiff Johnson, Facebook, Dr. Tiffany Johnson. Chiro website is htchiro.com and mentorship. That website's being rebuilt out by drtiffanyjohnson.com. Even if you're looking for somebody that is like, like you, like me, wherever you live, just shoot me an email, drtiffany@htchiro.com, or any of us actually, because we can help be that conduit, for finding a little bit more of a soul-minded doctor for you. I
Hmm.
think it's really missing in the world really badly, and more people want that. And actually, more and more people know that they want that. Whereas before, I would even say 5 years ago, they didn't really know they wanted that. Now they're like, okay, I've had these experiences. I do not like them. I want to do this
Yeah.
different. So
You just gave me an idea. I think I'm going to start a directory of all the people I get on the podcast over the years and build it up to where people
yeah.
can connect with each other right off my website if they want to. I think it's so fantastic because I mean, who knows? Like you might end up with a virtual practice, or you might end up launching this program where you're helping other chiropractors, or maybe somebody's listening and they're like, I want to be a you inspired me. Like seriously, if I didn't have 4 kids and I could afford to go back to school, I was like, I could go be a chiropractor. I never thought about that. That was awesome. Like it's
That's
cool.
amazing.
Yeah.
That's what I wish. I do have a podcast also, and I you give me that reminder to talk more about that, because I don't talk as much about Cairo. I talk so much about like life and your biggest, greatest, boldest life. And yes, Cairo is always part of it, but I do think people are really struggling to find somebody, whether it's extension of their health team, or even, yeah, go down a meaningful work path.
Yeah. Well, and I don't think people think about chiropractic that way. Like I wouldn't have I would like, to me, if I envisioned it based on my experience with chiropractors, because that's how we go into it, right? That's
Yeah.
what's so cool about you. You had such a cool vision. Um, I would have thought that would be boring to me. I wouldn't want to see people the same all the time and just crack their back and move on and next, next, next. Like that's not, I don't feel like my purpose is being fulfilled there because I want
Yeah.
to make a difference in people's lives. I want them to, like, my vision is so both of my parents have passed away already. And
Oh, gosh.
I understand like life is short, right? So I think to myself, it would be so cool if I could be like at my own funeral. I know it sounds morbid, but with people who've
No.
lost people that you get to this point. It would just
Yep.
be so cool to see people there who were like, Lindsay touched my life in a way that I'll never forget. That matters more to me than, having a million followers that don't really know me and would not come to my funeral. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like that's how I live. So I want to make that impact. And I do that through consulting in business. And that's
Yeah.
that's my part. But I could see like if somebody's thinking something like that, they may not consider chiropractic because but now they might, like listening to your
Yeah.
episode, they might be like, hey, I could do that. That's so cool.
Yeah. Thank you for
Yeah.
that. I honestly forget that, sometimes it's the blessing and the curse of being in your own bubble. In your own like ecosystem. I'm in my
Mhm.
own ecosystem on the mentorship side and on the Cairo side that that ecosystem is the people that know, love this and me, and this is just normal. So I really forget that this is not actually normal. So thank you for that. That's a
Yeah.
very different perspective.